Federal funding to remote Indigenous outstations runs out next year. The Northern Territory government has agreed to take over financial responsibility for outstations, but it's now asking the federal government to extend its support for homelands beyond next year. Earlier today, I spoke with the Territory's Minister for Indigenous Development, Malarndirri McCarthy. Malarndirri McCarthy, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Louise.
Commonwealth funding for outstations ends next year. Your government signed up to this. What will you do if the federal government doesn't commit to extending that funding?
What I am doing and have been doing and will continue to do, Louise, is to lobby the federal government. We clearly do not want them to walk away from the homelands and outstations of the Northern Territory. Our government has consistently said that we are wanting people to obviously live where they choose, but clearly we need the financial support to be able to do that.
But aren't communities like Kintore, which celebrated its 30th birthday this week, now in jeopardy?
Kintore is not the only community in the Northern Territory that has concerns about outstations and homelands. What I've said as I've travelled right across the Northern Territory is that this is uppermost in the minds of the Northern Territory government as we deal with federal politicians, not only Jenny Macklin as the Federal Indigenous Affairs Minister, clearly other ministers as well. As we look at the future for the Northern Territory, we recognise that homelands and outstations are very much a part of that, but we also know that we can't deal with that in isolation to the neglect in many of our communities right across the Territory.
But you signed up to this deal that saw the responsibility of outstations go to the Northern Territory government.
We certainly signed up to this deal, and unfortunately we also signed up with the belief that we had to do so. Otherwise we wouldn't receive the funding for the money for housing right across the Northern Territory. Now this is the kind of relationship that we want to really put an end to, where we're forced to actually accept a particular deal, otherwise we don't get another one. What we're saying in the Northern Territory government to the federal government is that work with us, not over the top of us.
You're spending $495 million on a new prison. Surely there's $20 million somewhere in there for outstations.
I am very confident that we will be able to find a solution to this. I've spent this year certainly advocating for the 500 jobs that we were very concerned we were going to lose. I'm not ashamed or afraid of fighting the Commonwealth if that's what's required. Certainly my colleagues with the Chief Minister, we have made very clear that the bush and the future of all who live in the regions must be considered properly, and we will continue to do that, and I am confident we will come to a conclusion on it.
This week in Parliament, the Country Liberals said people in regional areas have been disenfranchised and disempowered by Labor's super shy system. How vulnerable do you think your government is in the bush by the threat from the opposition to reform this shy system?
It's very easy for the opposition to now go out and parade that they are there to support the regions and Indigenous people in particular. Let's not forget the decades of underinvestment and neglect. What our government is about is looking at the decades of neglect and turning it around into decades of prosperity. That's exactly what we're doing. We recognise and we certainly hear the concerns about disempowerment and disconnect, but we are working every single day, Louise, to make sure that we can try and improve on that. Let's not also forget that this has come in line behind the intervention which has the greatest effect and in terms of disempowerment across the Northern Territory. These are the challenges for our government. We are not shying away and we are not afraid to fight for the people of the Northern Territory.
But is this putting Labor in trouble in the bush?
We're coming up to an election in August 2012. It clearly is campaign time for the opposition. They've decided to wake up and recognise they need to work on the bush. I think that's a good thing for the people who do live in the regions. But let's be clear, you shouldn't be out there promising financial support for any policies when you don't have any money to do that. The Northern Territory government, the Labor government, is not promising things we do not have the financial support for. We are going out working for it, fighting for it, and we are determined to get it.
You met with Minister Jenny Macklin this week to tell her you didn't want the intervention to continue, but it appears that's exactly what's happening. There is a second phase of the intervention. It appears what you said had no impact at all.
We are very conscious as the Northern Territory Parliament that we can be intervened on at any time by the Federal Parliament. The very act of the Surrender Act of 1908 has always made us very vulnerable, and we are vulnerable as Australians in the Northern Territory. That does not stop us from pursuing the fact that we can put forward a different model, different options. A significant amount of funding is coming to the Northern Territory, and I will continue, along with the Chief Minister and my colleagues, to make sure that we can work in a bilateral natural way.
But are you disappointed that what you said to the Minister wasn't listened to?
In politics, you learn not to be disappointed. In politics, it's about perseverance. And let me tell you, Louise, that's exactly what I will continue to do, is persevere on behalf of the people of the Northern Territory.
Malarndirri, McCarthy, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you.